Excuse me, apologies if I interrupt the meeting, but there is no audio for the virtual people.
Unmute. There we go.
There we go. Sorry about
Here
that.
we go. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so if you just recall, and then we'll go straight into the presentation. We have discussion about the budget that not yet resolved. We'll have some updates a little later that I think will be good news for folks. But we will turn now, and we've done strategic planning. We also value of folks is also hearing from experts, and we'll be hearing from our experts on our regional trails program as our first presentation. Is there any other context do you think we need, Craig, for before we turn to that?
No, I'm happy to turn it over to our coastal zone program manager, Rebecca Murphy, and our senior regional demographer, Jill Caniff, to walk us through the presentation.
Rebecca and Jill.
I'll have to find some seating really quickly. It's good to have
We brought seats up over here, but you can also bring them over here to the flexible. And if you want a paper copy, they're over there.
Are you gonna go through the slides or do you want us? Okay.
Yeah, that works.
All right, we're ready for coffee talk from the two. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. Well, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having Jill and I here this evening to present on our 2026 Regional Trails Program project updates. We're primarily going to give updates on two special studies that we completed this past year for the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail, and then we'll provide some other regional and statewide initiatives that we'll be completing over the coming year as well. Next slide. So jumping right into our Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail updates. Many of you are familiar with the Heritage Trail, also called PHNST or the trail, but we do have some new commissioners with us tonight. So just a little bit of background on the Heritage Trail. This is a congressionally designated trail network as a part of the National Trail System. It runs 900 miles from the Allegheny Highlands of Western Pennsylvania all the way down to the mouth of the Potomac River in Virginia and Maryland. In Northern Virginia, it spans about 138 miles as a braided trail network. So unlike some trail systems that you're familiar with where it's just one path, we consider this as different spurs and loops going into the many park systems that we have in the region as well. One thing to note for the PHNST is that NVRC has been coordinating with the National Park Service actually since the 1980s through cooperative agreements to provide coordination to over 20 parks and land managers for the trail. This includes many of your jurisdictions, but also some federal agencies and one nonprofit, the Nature Conservancy. So with this, we also receive funded task agreements where we provide technical assistance to the jurisdictions and other partners. And we also get to complete special studies based off of the interests and needs of those stakeholders as well. So next slide. So as mentioned, we did complete two special studies this past year. We completed phase 2 of our wayfinding and amenities implementation study, as well as the first phase of a climate resilience assessment. So first starting off with the wayfinding and amenities implementation study. This project really came about due to findings from a study that we completed back in 2022 that looked to understand the equity, health, and economic impacts of the Heritage Trail in Northern Virginia. Essentially, we were looking to understand what the benefits of a completed trail network would be for the region. But a key finding from this was that there were certain residents that didn't feel comfortable using the trail due to a number of different elements that you can see on the slide here. Some of those included a lack of amenities such as restrooms, parking lots. Others didn't have enough directional signage or wayfinding along the trail. So based off of these findings, we created this 2-phase study. First, to actually just understand where wayfinding and amenities exist along the trail in the first place. And second, to determine where we need new sites and then prioritize those sites for future installation. So next slide. So the last time Jill and I had the opportunity to present to you was back in 2024 when we shared the results of phase 1 of this study. Some of you may remember this was a year-long study. We had over 20 volunteers go out in the very hot and muggy Northern Virginia summer and collect over 4,000 data points. So this was anything from a blaze or that painting you see on a tree to direct the trail to every single bench, water fountain, bike maintenance station, etc. So it was a lot of work. It resulted in an interactive map that Jill created, as well as a report highlighting those studies. After phase 1 was completed, we issued an RFP and contracted the design and engineering firm Kimley Horn to conduct phase 2 of the assessment. Phase 2 ended up taking about a year total. And this consisted of a data collection phase, followed by spatial analysis and prioritization, which I'll describe in the next slide. And then this wrapped up in February of this past year with a report and interactive maps that we'll highlight as well. Next slide. So how did our project team go about actually selecting new sites for these wayfinding and amenities? A key first step was just understanding what type of placement frequency we needed for it. So obviously this was going to depend whether it was a bench or a picnic table or a type of wayfinding, but we looked to national standards, which actually there aren't a ton. So we really utilized our stakeholder feedback, had multiple meetings with them, asking them questions like, if you're out on the trail, after how many feet do you need to see another directional sign to make sure you're going the right way? And this was really helpful because it also helped us understand certain nuances. For example, we realized that you couldn't just place picnic seats and benches along the trail in an urban area less frequently than a rural area. So we had to determine a rural and urban context for certain amenities. And then we also realized that for certain sites, we needed to automatically have certain amenities. So thinking parking lots and different access points as well. So when you're hopping on the trail, you should automatically have a water fountain as well as a trash and recycling bin there. So after we determined where we wanted to place certain sites, we then went into the prioritization phase. And you can see on the slide here, we had 4 different criteria to be able to determine a low, medium, or high priority for the installation of each of these wayfinding and amenity sites. As you can imagine, for certain criteria like surrounding population, user activity, the greater the surrounding population, the higher the user activity, the higher the priority it would be for installation. And then for parking and trail access sites, this was also a higher priority to make sure that, again, we're increasing accessibility of the trail system. And next slide. So what were the results of this? A lot of recommendations. So the study resulted in over 400 amenity recommendations and over 2,900 wayfinding recommendations. It sounds like a lot. And the discrepancy between the amenity and wayfinding, as I mentioned, you're going to need certain wayfinding elements like the blue blazes of the trail, the directional signs, way more frequently than you might need to say, for instance, a park bench. For instance, the blazes we determined needed to be every 250 feet, which resulted in a lot of recommended blazes. So you can see just a few examples on the slide here of what some of our recommendations are. I could keep talking about the individual recommendations and how we determined the prioritization of each of these, but there's a QR code right there. If you would like to look into it further, you can read the report. And then we have some wonderful interactive maps that we'd like to highlight too. So next slide. And one thing that we did want to note here, and these are on your handouts as well, were those high priority wayfinding and amenity recommendations by management agency. So you can look and see your jurisdictions, Parks and Recreation Department, Public Works Department, et cetera, and see how many recommendations that were high priority per amenity. And one thing to note here, if you don't see your management agency, Again, that doesn't mean that they didn't have any recommendations within their jurisdiction. There might not have been any high priority ones, or for example, for Arlington County per se, Arlington County doesn't actually own or manage much of this trail. It's the George Washington Memorial Parkway there. So next slide. And then highlighting the wonderful maps that Jill created. If you actually want to go and dig into your jurisdiction and see the types of recommendations that are there, you can click on each individual recommendation. You can see the urban versus rural context for which the frequency is determined. And then Jill also put each individual prioritization criteria as well. So I'll let you take a look at that on your own time, but next slide. And I won't go through these too quickly. These are the high priority amenity recommendations per management agency. So again, taking a look at your relevant agency, seeing what we showed to our parks and land managers for the trail, and what we're hoping to be able to cooperate and collaborate with them on in the future. And next slide. Just another slide sharing the amenities results here. I wanted to highlight this one in particular, and you might need to actually look, within the handouts to be able to see that urban versus rural context. As you're heading south into Alexandria, you are seeing a lot more recommended sites versus when you get south and are heading westward, you're going to see fewer sites because that's when it moves into that rural context. So again, just something to keep in mind there. And next slide. And so again, we wrapped up this project in February of this past year. And then in terms of next steps, there's several things NVRC will be completing in the coming years. First is working with our different land managers and owners to help them identify funding sources and ideas of how we can get these high priority wayfinding amenities sites installed. We're also going to be looking to identify, other ways that we can improve accessibility of the trail in general. We recognize that wayfinding and amenities are just one very small component to this. So expanding this programming effort into the future as well. But we did also just want to highlight opportunities for commissioner support. There's a lot of ways that you're able to work with your Parks and Recreation Department or other relevant land management agency to be able to support the installation of these high priority sites, whether that's advocating for funding for these sites, whether that is putting them or working with those agencies to put them into comprehensive planning efforts. We want to ensure that our Parks and Recreation departments and other stakeholders are supported in being able to install these amenities and wayfinding sites. So with that, we will move on to the next project. Well, actually, I did want to highlight right here, we have already begun to implement portions of this study. So as an example, we've been working on installing new interpretive signage along the trail. So these were information panels at high priority sites that were identified through the study. We're looking to implement them this coming fall. We've been working to identify potential sites for them, but we are also already completed a few different information and different information panels this past fall as well. So with that, we'll be continuing to implement these types of sites here. And then this was a really pretty design from the National Park Service, highlighting the entire trail network within Northern Virginia. And so moving on to the next project here is the PHNSD Climate Resilience Assessment Phase 1. This also came from an interest and priority of our parks and land managers from several years ago within our corridor analysis. And again, this is a two-phase study. The first phase is a preliminary exposure assessment, which again, we completed this past winter. And the second is a complete vulnerability study and response strategy, which we are still looking for available funding to be able to complete. So just as a high-level overview of the methodology for this study, essentially within this exposure assessment, we wanted to be able to understand the overlap between assets on the trail, including all of the recommended sites from the wayfinding and amenities implementation study, as well as other sites along the trail, such as cultural and historic sites and monuments as well. So understanding the overlap between these sites, as well as key climate hazards within the region. So for the purpose of this study itself, we determined that flooding, sea level rise, and heat island effects would be the priority climate hazards to address. Again, we contracted Kimley Horn to complete this phase of the study. And so the way that we went about it, again, so looking at those 3 climate hazards. So for flooding, we looked at 100-year flood hazard area. For flooding, we looked at 5-foot projections of sea level rise based off of NOAA data. And then for the heat island effect, we actually looked at data that we had completed back in 2020 for urban heat islands within Northern Virginia as well. So looking at each asset, we did an overlap between these climate hazards, and then we combined each of them to have either low exposure, medium exposure, or high exposure based off of that overlap. I'll say that Kimley Horn also looked at other attributes and surrounding contexts that will help us to determine additional attributes to complete within the next phase of the study. So here you can see them being high ecological value areas, disadvantaged communities, and land cover as well. Next slide. And so again, Jill created a wonderful map to be able to highlight each individual asset and the level of exposure. So if you go onto the interactive map, you can click on it, each asset, and then you can see the level of exposure for each one depending on the hazard area. And then you can also turn on and off the hazard layers as well to be able to understand the overlap. One thing to note here is that for each hazard, we did have a buffer area. For instance, 100-foot buffer for the actual trail alignment versus a 500-foot buffer for the assets. So if you're looking on the map and you're like, I don't know how there would be, a 5-foot projection of sea level rise, recognizing that buffer area within there as well. So in terms of next steps for the study, we are still looking to identify future funding. So we are hoping to be able to work with the National Park Service to hopefully have an additional task agreement for this work. But we can already start to work with our parks and land managers to identify these high exposure sites and understand how we can implement different projects and initiatives that will reduce exposure, even changing the design of them in the future. And so again, this is an area where we can ask for commissioner support as well, advocating for future funding for this project. And again, also working with your parks and recreation departments or other relevant agencies to be able to identify areas where we can improve maintenance of those high exposure sites and also design changes as needed. And next slide. And so pivoting away a little bit from the Potomac Heritage Trail and into larger Northern Virginia-wide initiatives, we did want to note that there have been a number of statewide planning processes taking place over the last year and opportunities for involvement from our localities as well. One planning process that I did want to highlight is the Virginia Outdoors Plan. This is a comprehensive plan for parks, outdoor recreation access, other types of land conservation. It was last completed in 2024. And so they're working on current implementation of this plan, but they're also already scoping out 2030 activities as well. And this is where we can utilize our localities' help for that planning. So NVRC is already working with each locality to update their parks inventory. For instance, if there are any new parks that have popped up since the last data collection effort, all the way back in 2022. And kudos to some of our localities, including Manassas and Manassas Park, that got back to us immediately with those updates. But there's also other localities that we know have had significant updates since that timeframe, where we want to make sure that your data is included in there as well. DCR did also include 2 surveys to be able to understand recreation access opportunities. So, how we can improve accessibility of our parks and trail networks, and also other needs and priorities of our localities here. So again, this is really a space where we want to make sure Northern Virginia's voice is heard in the upcoming plan update. So understanding each locality's needs and interests for outdoor recreation planning will be essential for that 2030 plan to have Northern Virginia's voice included there. So those 2 surveys, I added some QR codes to the slides. We are looking for continued input. They do not have a survey end date as of yet, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get ahead on and continue to share it out as soon as possible as well. And next slide. And then lastly, just highlighting some upcoming work here, and hopefully we haven't gone too far past the time. Okay. So for the Potomac Heritage Trail, we do have a few additional projects coming up. First is we are going to be completing a pilot data tracking and reporting system for NPS for the Heritage Trail. Essentially, this will help to determine different metrics, both quantitative and qualitative, to be able to promote the trail in the future. This includes things like volunteers used, new land conservation, et cetera, associated with the trail. And we were really excited to have this project because after the pilot, we're hoping that the entire trail network will be able to use it in the future as well. Again, hoping for larger statewide advocacy around the trail and even across the entire trail network itself. Next, again, we noted we are still looking for funding for phase 2 of the climate resilience assessment, and then also looking for other funding opportunities and ongoing projects to support the implementation of the wayfinding and amenities implementation study. In terms of our regional trails programming, we are looking to continue to identify new fundings where we can really expand the Northern Virginia Trail Network. But we're also looking again at those statewide planning processes. I mentioned the Virginia Outdoors Plan, but VDOT also released the Virginia Statewide Multi-Use Trails Plan in May 2025, or May 2026, excuse me. And this is to develop an entire multi-use trail network for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. So they last collected data for this plan in 2023. As you can imagine, our trail network in the region has grown significantly since then. So Jill and I will be working on providing some data updates to VDOT this coming fall and winter to support that. And then last but not least, back in 2022, and I believe through 2024, NVRC held a regional trail summit. We didn't hold these over the last 2 years due to lack of funding, but we've been hearing continuous notes from our localities and other regional stakeholders that there is a real interest and need to be able to provide this type of event within the region to increase collaboration amongst our parks and land managers and really provide a space for them to be able to talk to each other, hear input on their projects, and have those types of discussion that aren't necessarily happening otherwise. So we are looking at hosting another summit in fall 2027. This will be contingent upon finding available funding for it, as always. But it is something that we are hoping to continue into the future. And so with that, yes. All right. Thank you again for your time. And I think Jill and I are happy to answer any questions.
So we will take questions. Thanks for your time.
Sure. Lauren, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation and the good work on this. Two questions. One, have you alerted those park and recs from our jurisdictions about this and what needs to be improved?
For the wayfinding and amenities implementation plan or the?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so we host quarterly meetings with our Heritage Trail park and land owners and managers, and we provided the results to them in that space. And then we also, I believe, had a training to be able to understand the interactive maps and how to utilize them as well.
And then are the trails and everything that you guys mapped out, are those like added in or synced with like, say, apps like All Trails and other things that people might use to I can't even not track their activity.
We have not actually looked into
know.
that to see how All Trails does their data collection, but certainly that's something we can embark on and see how they do it. Knowing that the trails change quickly and can become outdated rather quickly.
Yeah, but I think they're more established ones or whatever, have the information in the maps and might as well sync up with those apps that people use so they can
Yeah.
track their walks properly or whatever.
Yeah,
I brought
that's a
that
good
up.
idea.
I was trying to use it one day when I was walking in the Beaver Dam in Ashford and it wasn't working, so. Obviously, I was using the blue markers and stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is not working. So that's why when you did the presentation, that popped into my brain. And then lastly, Joe, what are you using? What is the software called?
ArcGIS?
BIS or ask for something like that PowerPoint when I was. I forget the name, like Tableau.
Tableau, not for this project, but for other projects, certainly.
Yeah.
We use that. Yeah, just not for this one. I use Tableau and Power BI for many of my dashboards, the demographic dashboards. And for the mapping, we use ArcGIS.
Thank you, great work.
Thank you. I think we had a question, Mr. Steve. Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I think the biggest thing for me would be kind of communication about the accessibility and some of the historic features, because we don't, I don't live near this trail, but I think people travel to the trails. I go to alltrails.com as well and look at how hard it is, what's the elevation, and can I do this? But I think that just kind of some type of campaign with communicating of the trails and accessibility of nature and the different amenities that are being put in would help for other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, we haven't done the outreach yet really to the general public on the amenities that are being added since we just started.
Existing, you know what I mean? 'Cause I think that's
Certainly the existing ones, yeah, pretty much what we've done to date is build the maps online and the brochures that we've got over there on the edge. Rebecca has distributed it across the region. Do you want to say more about that? Who you
Yeah.
distributed the brochures to?
Sure. So we did a pretty big push after creating those two brochures. And then I'll also say we have been starting to work a little bit more with economic development partners. For instance, we met with Prince William County Economic Development to really understand, how can we make that connection with our localities to be able to actually appropriately promote the trail network. It's one thing for us to be able to share out that information, but we know that our reach is only so wide there. So working with the right people and being able to share it that way, I think is a good next step for us as well.
So
Yeah.
trails are ominous, especially with
Yeah.
little kids.
Yeah.
And finding that trail that you can take a 6 or 7-year-old on and with the appropriate elevation
Yeah.
and is doable and it's fun, or there's a destination, there's a waterfall, there's something, that type of thing. So we need to start getting our younger generation, I think, engaged.
Yes, we got Commissioner Karen Jones and Commissioner Felcher. Go ahead, Mr. Tucker.
So, this is, I have to say personally, I'm a very big fan of the Potawatomi Heritage National Mountain. I wasn't here in 24, I wasn't aware that, I was not fully centered on the fact that you were doing this work. I'm very happy to see that. especially because of, you know, it's not the Arlington side technically because it's federal land, but on our side, this is actually a far cry from any acceptable, you know, condition there. I mean, if you compare it to the Mount Vernon Trail, for example, there's nothing compared to that. It's a real pity because this is a real economic asset. No questions there. Can you elaborate a little bit? What are we talking about when we say the funding of phase two, which is actually the physical assets and the conditioning of the trail in between? Because right now the trail, someplace actually in West Virginia and up in you know, rural, the panhandle of Maryland and all the way, it's in better shape over there. I've been and I've seen that. I mean, accidentally. But what are we talking about? What is the, you know,
How much money?
the money?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we really didn't look at what the cost of installation for all of these new priority sites would be. I think it certainly depends though, right, on the type of wayfinding and amenity. For instance, much of the wayfinding can be supported through NPS funding. They have the different plaques ready to share with any local jurisdictions. I'm pretty sure they're able to share the blaze paint when necessary. But a lot of it will come down to local jurisdictions being able to fund certain aspects of these. But this is where NVRC also wants to be able to come in and provide funding support as we can. Again, we've been starting it with the interpretive signs, but we're looking for additional funding as well to be able to support other installation.
Right. I have no doubt that there will be a huge variation depending on
Yeah.
the location, how difficult it is to get a picnic table over there,
Right.
et cetera. I get that. But providing some sort of a big box
Mm.
estimate to say, okay, this is more or less what we're talking about. Knowing that in other places in Virginia, this is already happening, and there is a lot of, you're right about that, there is a lot of focus on you know, recovering these recreational capacity facilities. I mean, even,
Sure.
you know, rails and trails and all this is fitting there. It would be helpful to understand how much
Mm.
that is, because especially people like us need this kind of frame of reference. This is really important. And on the data collection, I learned a lot from the Friends of the Mount Vernon Trail.
Yeah.
You know, they use even they have watches with GPS tracking, and
No doubt.
they're for people who, you know, these are actually normal Apple watches, etc. But you can ask them to keep the data, and they are then transferable to the map, and they can be commented on. You know, they can tell you what is the elevation that you are. I mean, it's not on just the static GPS point, but also the ruggedness of the terrain. It measures the difference in elevation. I mean, if you have to climb rocks, for example, or not, and etc. They can comment next to this data, and it's a good thing to have that collection in case you don't. And it's automatic. I mean, these watches are now far more affordable, and they are very accurate.
Great. Sounds like an opportunity maybe for an additional
I
conversation.
even bought one.
There you go.
This is what I know about this.
Well, I will say that's a good, thing to note. We completed a corridor analysis back in 2022, recording the trail type, the condition of it. But I would be curious to hear if other sections of the trail, are going into that fine level of detail to be able to record that as well.
There is an army of people who like to do that.
I have
because
no
they're
doubt.
just-
Yeah.
Not metal detectors, but certainly an army of people who want. Yes, Commissioner Polchek.
Thank you, and very excited. I remember it was a few years ago I first heard about this project, so glad to see where we are. And I think it was touched upon a little bit as someone who loves to hike trails, walk the Camino Santiago, to be able to see here and the impact of sort of some low lying fruits, right? That we can work with economic partners. There's also, I was looking on the NPS website and that they highlight the 250th, the semi-cinquentennial. So there are probably opportunities there. As well as you mentioned, National Park Service. I don't know if the National Park Foundation is also have now good contact there. So, I think breaking it down to make it easier, we've recently done wayfinding signs in Tyson's for the trails. And it's about getting through that first hurdle of now we know where they are, but then it's how do we make it easy to be able to bring in potential funding partners, right? Because there's the one-time fund of just placing items and then figuring out the long-term funding and going beyond. So it is, I do think, the economic development piece, and especially because it's a heritage trail, it's a good time. I think some of our 250th people often still have remaining funds and the ability to continue to work together. So places like Visit Fairfax or if you break it down to the smaller localities, but often also our economic development partners, we may need to, kind of figure out how to hone in on those priority areas and figure out who are the partners in that area. I think there could be some really interesting partnerships beyond just government.
Yeah, I
partnerships.
mean, it makes me think, in an ideal world, you could have something equivalent to the Adopt a Highway program, right? You have partners that take on the maintenance needs of a trail section. But that's down the line, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think now just getting them interested and aware, and you might just think about doing a tour, right, to some of these priority areas and asking jurisdictions, like we can tell you who are potential, community or business partners that may be interested now more than ever. So-
Yeah, that's an excellent idea.
Under the opportunities for commissioner involvement, if you send an email to Takis and Dahlia, you might get an opportunity. I'm not signing you up, but you might get a little opportunity there. Commissioner Chapman.
Thank you. At our last meeting before our break, we were approached by, or somebody came and spoke from the 9/11 Memorial Trail. And your presentation and the conversation about partners kind of reminded me of that fact, and creating the opportunity with the work that they're doing, and also I believe the state funds they receive to kind of integrate some of what we've talked about here into some of their work, particularly around signage. That could be helpful as we talk about partnerships. That might be kind of an out of the box partnership that some of us could probably use and take advantage of.
Yeah, that's good to note as well. Thank you.
Have you heard of them? They came to us as well.
Yeah.
You have.
So we've met with them as well as partners with the Washington Rochambeau Trail, which also spans through our region at a National Park Service roundtable a couple of years ago. And the way that they have each been going about promotion and enhancing the trail, little quirks to each, but I definitely think there's, good tidbits to learn from each other in terms of, how we can promote and use the trail.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I saw on the original list of amenities, restrooms, and then it disappeared because restrooms are hard and expensive and there's a lot of things, but 98 dog waste stations, appropriate.
Yeah.
Waste stations for dogs, no amenities for humans. I think that's kind of a problem. So I think we really realistically have to think about this. In Fairfax City, we have 3 Throne Lab bathrooms, solar powered, standalone, ADA accessible. We put one between Theis Park, which is being renovated, and a trail. And it was one of the most used amenities from that trail. People in my city are like, I use that trail because there's a restroom there. And so we have to consider that even though it's difficult and it's expensive, to not consider that it is a highly desirable need is to miss the point on these trails, I think. And the fact that we can do dog waste stations because it's easier, I get that. But 98 amenities for dogs and 0 for people, I don't know. I'm kind of having a little problem.
I'm sure we
We did restrooms. We may not have it added on the slide just because we wanted to keep it simple, but there definitely were restrooms in our study. So the report would show that.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right
Yeah.
that
So
the more expensive things shouldn't go to the
They
waste.
are, but the Throne Lab bathrooms are a unique construct over like the plastic porta potties.
Yes.
And Mayor Mondani has just invested $4 million in putting 17 of them in New York City in 5 different boroughs. And Los Angeles has them at their metro stations, and Atlanta has them, and Seattle has them, because it doesn't require electricity and it doesn't require water hookups, water and sewer hookups. Yeah, so I'm just saying, I understand it's a more expensive amenity.
Yeah.
But it's also probably in the list of things people would like to see on a trail, especially if you're taking children.
Yeah.
Is that. And so, you know, I just think setting that aspiration and figuring out how to make that possible in certain locations would add a lot of value.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say, I believe for the restrooms, the determined frequency was every 5 miles.
That's
Along the trail.
amazing.
Which is right, and that's why you're gonna see that difference in the number of recommendations, where we want to make sure that they're dog waste stations a little bit more frequently, so you're not seeing a bag like in the tree on the side of the trail. And again, it can be a little bit subjective as well, right? Some people may say 5 miles is not enough for a restroom, where other people are, 10 miles is totally fine,
Well,
but it's
5
something we're considering.
5 miles is better than nothing.
Oh,
So,
100%.
You
I
know,
agree.
10 miles is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So it's all a matter of perspective.
Right. Maybe there's a chance, I did not know about Corona Lab, that I did not know, maybe there's a chance to look at that, and it's also, you given context. Well, your slide said opportunities for commissioners, because you're not, you guys have given us the data, and then we would have to make the case, which is easy for Arlington, because we can't get to the, not our property, but I think if you didn't touch, maybe there's something that's plausible between your question, Catherine, and Tox's point on the scale of what we're looking for, and then the jurisdictions that can get there. And certainly, from my perspective in Arlington, we would love to get there. But Mount Vernon Trail that we have is not at the standard that we would like, but want to contribute there. So I think it's a fair point. Maybe we can look into it and see what we can learn. So thank you for the presentation. Lots of slides done quickly, and I just kept thinking after most of them, how cool is this? I wish I had a touch more time to do what the two of you have already been doing, and taking your kids to the trail and also getting out on trails myself, but that's on me to get there and on all of us to get there. But I wonder if it might be helpful, you mentioned a communications plan. It might just be helpful for a push out email of the link, because in each of our, there are moments when you have the energy in your personal email to add different contexts, and I'm sure that instead of the details of budget or housing policy, it would be nice to add this sort of piece. So that's what I'd at least ask, if we could try to do that.
Sure.
Without additional comments, unless there are, thank you very much for the presentation, both of you, and the immensely cool maps as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that, we'll go to adoption of action items, which is the next agenda item. And we have a couple of action items, I guess 1, 2, 3. Craig, do you want to describe them for us?
Yes, thank you. We were approached by the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, which, as I'm sure you all know, is doing a lot of work around organizing data about childcare availability towards being able to make more recommendations and come up with more action plans to get more childcare, more affordable and more available childcare. They have been working with our counterpart in Richmond, which is called Plan RDA, the Richmond Planning District Commission, to get some technical support in analyzing this data and in making connections with stakeholders to validate the analysis and to look for partnership opportunities. That was so successful that they reached out to the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions to see if all of the PDCs, basically statewide, could help in this effort. They are organized into what they call ready regions. And their ready regions, of course, are not exactly the same boundaries as planning district commission regions. Our 13 localities fall into two different ready regions. So the Loudoun, Prince William, and the localities in those areas are in one ready region, and then the other localities are in the other. So we got together with the George Washington Regional Commission to our south and the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission to our west, and have basically divvied up some responsibilities here. And we think that this is a great opportunity for us to help with something that's very important to the foundation, obviously, but also important to our member localities, and provide some additional data and some additional recommendations for whatever work you're doing within the localities. The foundation has proposed to pay us $24,000 to do the technical work and the stakeholder collaboration work associated with this. Some of that money would go towards the George Washington and Rappahannock-Rapidan portions of that work, but the majority of it would be conducted by NVRC because we have the technical capacity to do that. And by technical capacity, I really mean Jill is our expert analyst who is able to take on this work and do with childcare essentially some of what you just saw with trails. So this is a arrangement that is very pleasing to the foundation and to our neighboring PDCs. This money also takes some of the pressure off of your funding of Jill's time and our other staff time to work on this. So this resolution would authorize an agreement with the foundation to accept $24,000, some of which would be essentially subcontracted to our neighboring PDCs and to perform this analysis. We
Great.
recommend adoption of the resolution.
Great, thank you. Since you described it in some detail, we'll ask for, I'll move that we adopt this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in support say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously unless I see abstentions or, okay, so we'll go on to the next one.
Thank you. We have been embarking on a regional water supply planning exercise for some time now, and it's been funded by the localities under an agreement that goes back a few years. Some of our planning district commissions around the state that have not had the luxury of local support for this effort have really relied on the state funding that was made available for this effort, which was $9,000 per planning district. It didn't go very far for many of these PDCs. The General Assembly just added $750,000 statewide for this effort, of which NVRC would be eligible for up to $39,000. We have to apply for the money, so this resolution authorizes that grant application and the follow-on activities related to receiving and applying that money. We recommend adoption.
So moved.
Seconded moved by Mr. Commissioner Bodie and seconded by Mr. Commissioner Chantonis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. It's hard to oppose applying for me. So that's great. On to the next.
All right, thank you. As you know, we have an extensive international partnership program. Dale's here with us who leads that work. We have put together a multi-decade series of engagements to try to bring transformative best practices to Northern Virginia around specific policy topics that align with your priorities as our members, and to really focus on bringing subject matter experts to meet with subject matter experts to learn more about these best practices. We have an opportunity to do that again in Germany at the end of next year to focus on sustainable digital infrastructure policy. We have an opportunity to receive $15,000 from Dominion Energy to fund that trip. And this resolution would authorize receipt of those funds for that purpose. We recommend adoption.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Chapman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, no abstentions. All right, so we didn't have extended discussion over those three items, but I guess I didn't think that we needed extended discussion over those three items. And now we'll go to the executive director's report.
Thank you. So I'm happy to start out with some really great news. We just received notice a few hours ago from the Virginia Department of Health that NVRC's portion of the $6.6 million appropriated for the Ryan White program will be $779,000. That is great news. The two caveats are, number one, we don't know how much of that yet will be allowable for administrative expenses, which means we don't yet know exactly what the impact of this is on our budget. It's definitely good, but we're not really sure quite how good. We can't make other plans based on that until we submit a more detailed budget to VDH and get their approval. The other caveat is that although this takes us up to $1.6 million, that's still down from the $2.7 million where we started last year. So we went from 2.7 million to a low point of 718,000. And now we're back up to 1.6 million. What this means, as I mentioned at the last commission meeting, is that this program is shifting from a federal/pharmaceutical funded program to a state-funded program that also has pharmaceutical and federal contributions. And we need to educate the General Assembly about that shift. We need to make sure they understand that this was not a one-time crisis funding situation, but this is the beginning of a new normal. And we need to work towards that reframing and that education process. Well, there's actually a third caveat, which is that VDH decided not to fund any of the Ryan White programs around the state that were completely defunded last year. So this 6.6 million is being split only among the programs that remain standing. There is another 6.6 million in the state budget for next year. And if VDH decides to give some of that money to the previously defunded programs, it's possible we could receive less money of this allocation next year than we did this year. But also we have an opportunity to collaborate with the governor on recommending an increase to that 6.6 million in next year's budget. So, you know, we might get a smaller portion of the 6.6 million, but hopefully that 6.6 million pot would increase next year. And all of that remains to be seen. So all of this is really great news. We're not sure exactly how great. I sort of wanted to bookend this to point out that the real point of this program is the patient services. And our focus in many of these conversations is on the money, because without the money, we can't do the program. But it's also really important that VDH has expanded the number of services that we can provide to patients using this new allocation to bring us back closer to where we were before. And I put the photo here on the slide of Ryan White, who was a young teenager who developed HIV and AIDS as a result of a blood transfusion for hemophilia and died at the age of 18. Really just to keep the focus on, we have real patients here. They are individual people. We talk a lot in these abstract numbers, but we want the focus to remain on the patients. And this $779,000, regardless of how much of it NVRC can use for administrative expenses, will mostly go towards these vital patient services. That's the important, the really important part of the great news of today's announcement. Carol Huell's with us, who directs our human services program, and I just want to give kudos again to her and her staff for weathering a lot of ups and downs, which are very, very highly summarized on this slide, but it doesn't begin to tell the story of the sort of drama that this program has undergone in the last year. So thank you to Carol and her staff.
And it's time for a round of applause for Carol.
Any questions about that? Okay.
I mean, hold on a second. I think that first you did a ton of detailed advocacy in Richmond and got into the weeds, and it's both important for the organization, but so appropriate that you ended where it should be, with the focus on those who are in need. And I think all of us at one point or another talked with the staff who leads on this program and know that, and Bob described it a year ago, 2 years ago now, but just an outstanding piece of work. And We don't know all the implications of what's to come, but I think it's worth at least pausing and sort of emphasizing, because I don't always see 6 to 9 head nods during the middle of presentations, without any disrespect to Rebecca and Jill. We had head nods there, but just this is a big victory for program, and also a big victory for the organization. We have to see what's going to come in the years, but I hope it's okay. I interrupted. Jill.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
You can interrupt with a pause on any.
Yeah.
So, I mean, no questions. Congratulations. We are climbing out of a very deep pit that's there. But you mentioned that, so to understand correctly, NVRC has now to submit, a program application, a complete program application that will include the administration, investment that's
Yes.
needed to run the program. I always consider administration investment also patient service, but that's me. So in the previous, when we had the 2.7, what was approximately the preparation? I mean, do you remember percentage wise? Was it high, low?
You mean the indirect or administration?
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know.
What is misnomered as overhead is so
Yeah, so our.
it doesn't have to be answered right now. I mean,
I think that falls, you can answer, but it falls under the more to come piece of it.
yeah, let's do it.
You know, Carol?
Well, we have some preliminary estimates that we think we're gonna wind up with about $538,000 of administrative costs out of this 1.6 million. That includes not only the cost of administering these patient services grants, but also administering the statewide database that's used to track the data associated with this program. So we're basically taking on a leadership role for the state that VDH is paying for. But that is somewhat of a question mark about whether we understand correctly the administrative allowances that these estimates are based on. We had a little bit of back and forth with VDH today. I spoke with the state health commissioner briefly. We just got this information a few hours ago, and so we're not 100% sure what that ratio will wind up being.
I mean, just for reference, administering a health-related program is always, and a lot of our constituents and many of our elected officials don't usually understand that. It has a higher cost. If you have a nurse working there, that counts. I mean, accountants will assign that to overhead, but it's not. It's actually, you cannot administer the program without a nurse. And so this is why it normally is a little bit more than, the philanthropic percentages. And this is why I'm mentioning that, in case this needs some support from commissioners as well.
Yep, thank you. Is there anything, Carol, you want to add? Is that covered?
Yeah.
You may not know all things in 3 hours or 4 hours since, but just really appreciate, I think the applause is partly for you and your colleagues, in addition to Craig and all the work that has been done. With that, we'll go on to the next piece of the report, if that's okay.
Thank you. Some more good news. I think the rest of these slides are all good news. We just found out within the last few days that the public education campaign for Only Rain Down the Storm Drain won an award from the Association of Marketing and Communication Professionals for the social media part of that education campaign. And so although this award was technically won by the contractor, the consultant that put together the campaign, really reflects the campaign itself. And so we're very proud of that. I want to give a shout out to Von Zell, who's with us. I told you last year that Governor Youngkin appointed him to the Virginia Board of Veteran Services. Governor Spanberger has reappointed him to that board. So within a short period of time, he has picked that bipartisan support.
Votes from those two is unusual.
Yes, one of the only people in Virginia who's been appointed by both of those governors already, I think. So congratulations. And as you know, Von Zell's work is driving a lot of our partnerships and our relationships across the region, and also helping significantly with our budget. So thank you to Von Zell and Philip. Thank you. A couple of weeks ago, Dale and I had the opportunity to visit the Stuttgart region in Germany. This is part of a 2-year study that the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is conducting on regions undergoing industrial transition. And particularly for those of you who have been with NVRC for a while, you know that we have partnered with the Stuttgart region for about 27 years now. They're a strikingly similar region in a lot of ways, almost the same physical area, almost the same population, a very high standard of living, very progressive. And their industrial transition is away from the automotive industry to what is next. Ours is maybe away from the federal government to what is next. And so although some of the particulars are a little bit different, we have a lot in common. And the foundation that we had already built with this relationship is serving this study perfectly. And the OECD is going to write case studies about our regions and 6 other pairs of regions around the world that are part of this study. So they paid for the travel to meet with the folks in Stuttgart and to see a lot of this happening up close. We also worked in some of our other favorite topics like brownfield revitalization. We looked at an edge data center that is sharing their heat with a school next door and an office building next door, a green hydrogen production facility for their public buses, and several other examples of the kinds of best practices that we look to bring to implement in Northern Virginia. You'll see a picture on the lower left there in a coffee factory that existed from the 1800s until about 6 or 8 years ago. This was a very old, long running factory that just shut down in a small town, and how they're looking to repurpose that building for a variety of different innovative public uses. And although, you know, we're looking more at commercial office space and less at coffee factories that we're trying to repurpose, it's that same kind of imagination about what can be. In the lower right there is a map of our counterpart region, the regional council there in Stuttgart. They have 179 localities in their region. So when we talk about, well, 13 is a lot, and we have a few more towns than that aren't members. They have 179 to sort of wrangle. In the upper left or upper right there, we're very fortunate to be able to meet with the governor of the state that Stuttgart is located in, who, as it happens, Dale is known for several decades. They've sort of grown up together in international engagements, and now he's the governor. And so we were able to talk to him about, you know, some of the dynamics there about state and local relations, and it was very he offered a very, very gracious hospitality. I just wanted to end by showing you the seating chart for the regional council in Stuttgart. When, you know, my staff has to wrangle these tables to set up a meeting, at least we don't have 9 different political parties that have to be separately seated. This is literally their meeting room, and the number of commissioners that they have. And their commissioners are elected by the public to be regional commissioners. So they're not appointed by their local governing bodies, but many of them also serve on their local governing bodies. So they're running separately to be on the town council, the county council, and the regional council at the same time. But of course, they have a parliamentary system that works a little bit differently. So they're not actually putting out yard signs for 3 different races. Sort of thing. But it was fascinating on top of the more technical discussions to kind of talk about some of the dynamics of regional representation and just the way that these regional bodies work. Okay, in other good news, we just found out within the last few days that we've been recognized by the Fairfax County Green Business Partners Program as an ally. That means that although we're not a business, we are an organization that is working with businesses to create a carbon neutral economy in Fairfax County. So we appreciate that partnership. Last week, I had the opportunity with the senior staff here to meet with the new director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is the agency that oversees planning district commissions and the agency that funnels our funding from the state to NVRC. Dr. Holmes was the director of the broadband office at DHCD before, so she's actually worked very closely with some of the rural PDCs and really understands what the point of PDCs is. We had an opportunity to brief her in quite a bit of depth on the vast array of programs that we administer here and a lot of the impacts that we're able to have as a result of close collaboration within our region and between our region and the state. I think it's fair to say she was very impressed with what we're doing here and identified some specific things that we're doing that she'd like to try to bring to other parts of the state. For example, our solar maps and our heat maps. So identifying locations where solar could go on rooftops and identifying areas to be concerned about in terms of heat islands. That's something that's very transferable to other parts of the state. So we talked about different funding opportunities. We also advocated for additional state funding for planning district commissions, not only for ourselves, but for all of the PDCs. And I think it's the beginning of a great new chapter in our relationship with DHCD that we will definitely be following up. And on that note, this governor's administration has really spent a lot of time on what I guess you could call listening tours. And already just in May, June, and July, we've participated in these workshops on economic development, on emergency preparedness, and on the Virginia Energy Plan. And essentially, the governor seems to have directed her cabinet to ask stakeholders what the administration should be doing, which I think is great. And it's an opportunity for us to say, these are the challenges we see, the gaps we see, the opportunities we see, and in particular, a way to say that planning district commissions have a really important role to play in helping with any of these types of issues, and that the regional infrastructure that planning district commissions represent can be leveraged against any kinds of challenges. And I think that this administration is very, again, sort of understands what PDCs are about and for, and so I hope that there's more to come on that. Of course, the proof is in the pudding, and although these have been really gratifying opportunities to give feedback, we expect to see that feedback incorporated in the action plans that result. And the next one to come out is probably the Virginia Energy Plan. There's also a public input period, a public comment period open right now for the Virginia Energy Plan. So if any of you or your staff or your constituents would like to give input on that plan, that's open to the public to do. Speaking of Virginia Energy, they just sent us an early draft of their report on data center waste heats. I mentioned that we saw an example of this in Stuttgart. MVRC is a real leader on this, by which I mean Dale is a real leader on this. And he helped with this report. And as a result of MVRC's work, in just 37 pages, MVRC is mentioned 20 times. And depending on how you count it, with different footnotes and abbreviations, I mean, it might be more than 20. But I think, definitely we're being, this is a major contribution that we've been able to make to the body of knowledge in Virginia policy planning. So thank you to Dale and to Virginia Energy. And I think this is the last slide. We have an RFP open through July 31st for the development of a climate atlas. And you can go to novaregion.org to see more about that. The screenshot here is a picture from the Stuttgart Climate Atlas, which we were able to discuss on our trip a couple of weeks ago. And I think what you're seeing here is a slider that you can move from left to right between the current state and one of the scenarios that shows how heat may be distributed in the future based on climate change. So this is just an example of the kinds of uses that somebody could make of a comprehensive platform that brings together this data about climate. I think that's all I've got. So lots of great activities for the last month, and the last part of my report is the June 2026 financial report. You'll see we're down just a little bit. This is mostly because we paid a lot of year-end bills in June, and because we had a piece of an extra pay period in the month of June, but as always, this washes out over the course of the year. Happy to answer any questions about any of these items.
Any questions? Thank you very much for the report, for the thorough report and all the work. Did learn that it was a breakneck trip to Germany. Several of you have gone Germany, and there's such value in those trips. But all of the report, it's a ton of work. I was at the State Energy Plan meeting that Craig was at, and it is an interesting piece, and certainly your localities are, I'm sure, engaging. I know in a couple of places, but it's a very interesting conversation. That is my chair's report, other than to say I'm mindful. Thank you to each of you for making the effort. I think there were some calls to get folks to attend tonight, and there's great at least I got a call.
It was to ask if you were attending, not to try to get.
Well, in any event, we got a break now, and it's July and it's late. John, you had a question?
I just had a quick
Sure.
committee report.
Yeah.
I serve as a NVRC representative on Go Virginia. I will probably have, not every month, a report, but we meet quarterly and we have some updates and state board meetings in between. We just had a meeting this morning where we had, and I just want to make sure we're briefed on that. In the past, we really haven't. We've always had somebody there representing NVRC, but we just haven't had communication back to the commissioners, and so I want to kind of change that. At our meeting today, we heard from the GMU Quantum Hub. They were asking for $3.6 million. And we also heard from Northern Virginia Community College that is looking to put together an internship program kind of in higher tech, kind of aligned with not only data centers, but some of the additional kind of higher tech things that are happening in the region. And they were asking for $2.8 million. Both of those were approved by the board. The next step is to have those submissions or those applications go to the state board and get approved. From what I'm understanding of Go Virginia and their success rate at the state, it's kind of mixed. And so we are trying to work with our staff, but also state staff, to ensure that projects that are approved by the board kind of get approved by the state as well. And so hopefully throughout the year, I'll be giving you updates of entities, organizations that will be coming forward with requests. I also want to make sure I elevate kind of our knowledge of what Go Virginia does. And so if we hear about an entity, an organization, or a school that is looking to do some work and needs some level of funding, whether it's in the planning or in the execution, we can kind of have our ears open as well, as this is a nice resource for some of those opportunities. Thank you.
Questions? I mean, we've all been in meetings where colleagues have not delivered succinct, excellent information quite like that, John. And so I just, John, you sought out this role in part to make sure that we were better informed. And if you think about all of us, we don't have Northern Virginia Community College is one of the best in the nation. And certainly we care about quantum because one of the George Mason campuses impacts us. But just a big thank you for the presentation, and engage with them individually if you want. But I do think it's so critical that we get more regular reports. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. And that I was at the end of sorry. Oh, yes. No, I had that in mind, but I was the end of the question. The chair's report is now done, other than to reiterate a big thank you for all of you being here. And now we're going to the adoption of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from June? Mr. Bodie, Commissioner Bodie, seconded by Commissioner Chapman in this case. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes pass. There are no other matters that I am aware of. Is there any objection to adjourn? All in favor of adjourning, say aye. Thank you all. We'll see you in September.